and today we will be discussing the book The Blade Itself
As though the blade itself were red hot.
by Joe Abercrombie. I've read this book a couple years ago. Eric, this is brand new to you.
This one kind of flopped for me. I had kind of maybe some big expectations. I was excited to try a different genre. This is supposed to be, what'd you call it? Grimdark?
Grimdark, yeah.
Grimdark? Okay. So this is something that like I haven't read before, so I was kind of excited to try something different. Um, and you had told me to kind of expect that this is maybe more like character driven, and I through reading it, like I tried to be open, but I think I'm much more inclined to go for those more maybe plot driven narratives. This one just didn't hold my attention. So I'm actually kind of curious to hear like, where you heard about this one to get you excited about this, and like if you've read the rest in his series, or like what was your interest that pulled you into this one?
Yeah, so being involved with BookTube, as I believe I was telling you a little bit before, this book is very well covered in the BookTube space. There are a lot of people that have reviewed this book and discussed this book at nauseum as being one of their sort of favorite modern fantasy reads. The Blade itself is the first book in the Joe Abercrombie's first Law trilogy, so there are two trilogies with a few standalones that all take place in this very modern fantasy world. And just as a little recap for the first book in the series, we won't be talking about the other books, just the Blade itself. And I'm interested to know if you're going to read the next two in this series and maybe continue beyond. But this book is a character study. There's a few points of view, very different characters, and it written from their perspectives, but kind of this third person omniscient narrator that sort of delves into their minds occasionally to get a more visual perspective from the character, right? But there is a hero's journey that is sort of set up throughout this book. I will say one of the things that I noticed on sort of my reread or my much more shallow second read than my first is that the hero's journey really doesn't start until the end. If you compare this to sort of a modern piece of fantasy or a more traditional piece of fantasy literature like The Lord of the Rings, this is very different. And I believe that's very much intentional. It's almost the counterbalance to The Lord of the Rings. And there was a joke in the middle of the book that almost seems to take a little stab at The Lord of the Rings and how it was written, as these are very opposite sort of dichotomous books. Did you find that you were drawn into the plot of this book, seeing as though I had said it was a more character focused story? Did you find that you were drawn in?
No, no. Honestly, I had moments where like I could get on board, and there were moments where there were scenes, vignettes that like I could get pulled into. There was probably like, that like I can get past like maybe some of the like use of profanity, which like I'm not afraid of it, but like it didn't seem like it was used to a point, to an effect where it helped bring me in or like helped me to learn the character. It just felt like it was kind of there without any other reason. And so like those things, maybe that was part of it that maybe put me off a little bit. Like, and I can get gritty, but it didn't feel like that little pebble did anything to serve me as the reader. So it was interesting because I did find myself reading these passages and then asking myself like, why do I care? Like out loud, I was like midway through and I was thinking to myself like, why am I here? Like, where is this going? So there were pieces that I think he does play with some of that realism, and I get that like the world isn't rainbows, and like you can play with that to give your audience an effect, but like maybe I just missed it. So no, I guess I just maybe wasn't pulling the pieces together to see where he was going with that. And maybe that's just my, coming into a different genre. I don't know, kind of having maybe some expectations of like where the piece might go. I don't know, what's your on that?
As far as the inclusion of profanity, I actually thought it was used well, especially in the prologue. So this will be sort of spoiler filled.
Spoilers.
This book's been out for a while and has been discussed at nauseum. So rather than trying to avoid spoilers, I will do my best to not bring in things from books 2 and 3. But from the perspective of this first book, we are going to probably include some spoilers. But the title of the prologue is The End. And to start a book with that title is like a bit of a signaling by the author, in my opinion, that he's going to be subverting some tropes throughout the narrative here. And right away, when Logan is sort of running away from the Shanka, which are essentially this book's counter to like the Urukai type creature, the goblin sort of orc creature that you see in a more traditional fantasy setting. He is looking around, he kind of falls off of this cliff, and he just goes a 4-letter expletive, which is supposed to, in my opinion, bring you into this character and be able to relate to him more. Like, where when we're in this situation of danger that we don't necessarily want to find ourselves in, generally we're not going to be like, dear me. We are going to say something a little more pointed and a little less like PC.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought he used it well when he used it. The characters that did use it and when they used it, I felt like it made them more relatable. The main focal point of the beginning of the book is Logan Nine Fingers, and he is sort of the stand-in barbarian with a little bit more to him. What were your thoughts about like this personification of the barbarian trope and his sort of growth throughout the story?
You know, I think I think I didn't really, because none of the characters really pulled me in. There were some pieces that do stand out to me, but I think that because maybe I didn't relate to them, I just didn't care. I didn't care enough to like care about their journey through that. So, it was interesting. I'll tell you some of the things that kind of brought me in a little bit, I guess. So I guess when Logan had the battle later on, right? And it's this kind of dialogue between, the use of magic as he was getting beat, right? And it's kind of the excitement there of the energy of just the description of the battle, but it's also the idea of, that moral piece of like that they weren't supposed to be, using and cheating by using
Well, and are you
magic.
thinking of, and this kind of goes
Luther,
into,
I might,
you're thinking of
yeah,
Luther,
I'm thinking of
which
Luther.
who we
Sorry.
haven't talked about. Logan was the barbarian. So the Bloody
Yeah.
Nine, the
Okay.
Logan Nine Fingers.
Got it.
So
Okay.
that I guess is a commentary on how this book didn't pull you in.
No,
That
no, yeah. Him and then the Inquisitor was the only other character I think that I was pulled into, just because he was so. And I forget what his name is. It starts with a G.
Glokta.
Glokta. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. And this is just a thing. If it's not like a more common name for me, I have a hard time even like
Mm-hmm.
remembering who it is, right? So I probably should have been able to pick up on Logan, but yeah, Glokta was a very like pronounced character for me just because he was so like cringy and like just the way he used torture and I think that he was interesting like throughout the journey, but yeah, I guess Logan didn't really um wasn't a character that I guess I really followed. I
Yeah.
think my mind as I'd listen, because again, maybe this is part of the problem too, is I wasn't reading a physical book. I was listening to these as audiobooks. And so like I think that when I'd start, my attention span would probably hold for about 10 minutes or so. And then, you know, just because I didn't connect with it, I think that I'd kind of be disconnected through the journey.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. And did you, so with Glokta, it's kind of
mhm,
transitioning over to him a bit because he
yeah.
is sort of a fan favorite in the book. So if you are talking about Logan, so Logan is this barbarian figure. He is this man of the North. He's the embodiment of barbarism and uncivilized society, in direct sort of counter to the other characters in the book, who are all very much part of high society. Glokta, in multiple ways, and Luthar, Jazal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jazal being sort of this, not highborn, but noble, sort of knightly character. And in a traditional fantasy novel, you're going to be drawn towards Jazal. Like, Jazal is supposed to be the knight in shining armor. He is a self-obsessed character. He is a misogynist. He is just a terrible guy who sees those that were born outside of privilege as being less than himself. He thinks he knows his friends when he just kind of uses them to his own benefit. And he is sort of the character that you're supposed to like. He's the main character. He's
Like the
the
stereotypical.
stereotypical knight, but you kind of get this peek behind the curtain. Like, Abercrombie kind of pulls it back. It's like, yeah, you know, that fantasy, that knight you've been reading about for all these years, that you're getting a superficial sort of glance at. He's kind of a jerk. And if you really got a peek behind the curtain, you probably wouldn't like him so much. And
Mm-hmm.
why is he going on this journey? And then you have Glokta, who's sort of the fallen hero. So Glokta, he stood upon a bridge. He was a champion at one point in time, the best fencer in the entire world, the entire Union. And he sort of took a stand, expecting full well to sacrifice himself. And instead, he's taken captured and tortured. And he's fully expecting to die. He doesn't. He gets away. He gets rescued. He returns to the Union. And he is so beaten and incapable from what he had to endure before, that he is just not capable of being a functioning member of society outside of his new role as the Inquisitor, this torturer, essentially, to get information. So you have Jazal, who is sort of the knight in shining armor. You have what happens when the knight in shining armor falls in Glokta. And then you have the other side of just like pure violence and rationalism in our friend Logan Ninefingers, who are the main three sort of characters in this. You have the others, you have the Magus Baez, you have the sort of secondary main character Pharaoh, who comes in later. She plays a bigger role in future books, so I have to be careful as to what to talk about. But given sort of Jazal and Glokta's relationship as the former champion of the Union, a great fencer, sort of the man of the people, this famous fencer. And he sort of looks at Jazal like, you aren't worthy of this. And Glokta, however much he wants to like end it for himself, he always talks about how he is waiting for the day when he just doesn't wake up, right? Because he wakes up and he's in his own filth, and he has this guy who takes care of him and cleans him up. He's
I
also very driven.
There was actually one phrase I think, and I think I wrote it down. It was something like, "I don't mind dying, but I refuse to be beaten." Right, and that
Yeah.
one just kind of leapt off, and it stuck with me.
Mm-hmm. Because he's very much kind of sickened by himself and the fact that he
Mm,
can't do the things he used to do.
yeah.
But if you give Glokta a task, he is going to accomplish it. Like,
Hmm.
and he talks about like Severard and Frost, his sort of henchmen, as being his hands, and he is the brain of the operation. Um, and he just kind of uses them to get things done. Which, having that type of character be the character people kind of latch on to, I think he's very well written and he's very relatable, but it's also a bit of a commentary on our current society's almost self infatuation and drive to just sort of accomplish things and get things for ourselves. How do I want to say it? Our current society's sort of need to have the focus be on oneself.
Mm.
Because he mentions all the time he doesn't care about the union. He's just trying to look out for himself and get things done. At the end, he actually talks about how he just like history needs to be paid attention to, but I'm not the one that needs to pay attention to it.
Mm.
Like, hey, there's big things going on, but they have nothing to do with me. Did you so if we put this in as an opposite to the Lord of the Rings, you have Gandalf the Grey, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Baez. These sort of super involved characters that are sort of leading the plot along, sort of making decisions for others. Because Gandalf does that all the time. Like
Mm.
he sets Bilbo on his quest, right?
Yep.
And Baez kind of does the same thing with Logan and Jazal. Between the two, contrasting the two, did you find anything about Baez interesting?
Uh, I don't know. Not really. Not particularly. I Again, this one I think not getting the hook right away in the beginning, it just kind of set me off. And so, I guess it's interesting when you talk about it, because as I'm thinking about it, like there is an interest, like in retrospect, when you think about some of the uses of, I don't know, some of the grotesqueness, the nature that people do find interesting. So like I think about one of the reasons, sorry to bring it back, but like thinking about Glokta, like what was useful in that to me is like it was the grotesqueness that actually got me intrigued and interested in
Mm-hmm.
like trying to look at what he was trying to do there. And so I could see the effect of that and it pulled me in, and now like I could see him from a different light through. But like for some of them they hit so flat that like they weren't memorable. So like I found myself and kind of losing myself in the journey. So no, I think like Baez, yes, like I could follow it enough to be able to pull me through the book, but it was a struggle to get me to the end. And you've given me other books in the past that have been slow, and like because I trust your judgment on that, right? I'll read through it, and then I've read the other books and then come to appreciate it at the end and be like, oh, now I get it. Let me reread this and actually enjoy it the second time around, right? So when you ask me, is this one where you're gonna read the others? Unless you can convince me that the others will give me context, or maybe I didn't pay attention to a particular character, or maybe I didn't really kind of get the mission, right? So I don't know. So you tell me what are your thoughts then on Baez?
So Baez I mean, if you look at him in contrast to Gandalf, like Gandalf
Yeah.
has these greater motivations throughout Lord of the Rings, and you
Hmm.
have Baez kind of the same. Like
Yeah. More
he talks about
self-serving agenda instead of like
yeah, like
the
he
yeah
he has an agenda as he goes through,
yeah
and he kind of pokes like Baez is like in my opinion the closest thing we have to like the author's commentary on things
hmm
and like
hmm
almost breaking the fourth wall in the middle of the book. If you remember this scene where Logan, so you have the big barbarian, you
hmm
have Quay, sort of the wizard's apprentice, and Baez, and they all show up to town. And Baez, from up until this point, was mostly sort of wearing very like egalitarian, sort of useful garb, right? This is
hmm
I live in a castle or a keep, sort of in the middle of the wilderness by myself
hmm
with Quay, and that's about it. So he has this utilitarian look about himself. He gets to the city, and their first stop is a costume shop. because he's like, all these highborn people here, when they think about a magnificent wizard, think about someone wearing like a long flowing robe and carrying a staff and having these sort of visualizations, this iconography about them, right? So
Yeah.
they stop at a costume shop and they buy a bunch of furs and things for Logan to make him look more barbaric, and then he has this like long red robe that he buys. um, and what I find interesting about the book is that it sort of points fingers at some of these tropes, and it kind of makes fun of them at the same time as fulfilling them. Because you have this scene, and then later Jazal is like looking at this man in this robe and being like, man, he must be very important. He is wearing a robe and is very, like, very magnificently dressed. Like, I am in awe. And then you have Glokta over here, like, being the more realistic person and almost a bit nihilistic, looking up at this man in the robe. I don't trust him because he's so on the nose.
Priest's robe?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's pretending to be this wizard. He's not a wizard, when truly he is a wizard pretending to be a wizard,
Fair. Yeah.
which is interesting. And even earlier
Yeah.
when Logan meets Quay and he's like, "Oh, I thought all wizards had staves and you're a wizard's apprentice. Where's your staff?" And he says, "Well, I'm an apprentice. I get my staff later. I get my staff when I become like a full-fledged like practitioner of magic." So like he pokes fun at these tropes, but also at the same time uses them to his benefit as this way of, in some ways, possibly being a little bit too on the nose, but in a way of bringing the reader in, sort of going against expectations, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even in the middle, and this is why I keep bringing up Lord of the Rings, there's a point where they're outside of the makers, like the house of the maker, which is essentially a big sort of mausoleum in the center of the city that hasn't been opened forever, which was like an artificer's construct, like a relic of the past, that was the house of one of the three original master magi. And there's some writing on the door, and when they ask him what it says, he says, "It says, you shall not pass,"
You shall not pass.
or something along those lines. And it's very sort of on the nose, that's kind of a joke towards Lord of the Rings, right? It was very slow. I agree with you. This book is very slow. It's very character driven, very trying to set up these people, make them relatable,
And
and also give the characters depth,
yeah.
which I think it does well at the loss of sort of a through line plot.
Yeah. I think like it was funny because there were certain scenes where there was action, there was grappling, there was, there were fights that occurred. Like, I don't know, like I said, the one with Luther, that was one that maybe pulled me in more, but because there was commentary going on the aside, and so it maybe it was like the rounds of the duels that like it was compelling because then there was that narrative arc there, right? But then there's other grappling that happens down the road, whether they're on the trail or they're in a, I don't know, if it's a bar somewhere, right? But like it kind of drones on and it didn't seem to kind of do anything for me. And I guess I maybe just would get lost in those passages, or there'd be dialogue that like it just didn't hit for me. And so I think I obviously didn't pick up on some of those things. Like I could understand, okay, maybe part of it, but maybe I just didn't get the deeper humor just because from the beginning I don't think I really got that hook set in that like made me feel like I wanted to get to the next page. So like I've been reading the new Dan Brown books, right? And so those types of thrillers where like it's a very conventional, right, page turner,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very different genre. So yeah, hearing you talk a little bit about that, like maybe it's just a little bit of humor I need to be open to, and if I can see that, maybe that'd be interesting. A lot of times I feel like it's almost like maybe too real, right? Like he's building these characters, because I think you sent me something afterwards to kind of read a little bit of commentary from the author himself, and I think that was really eye-opening to see kind of where he might be trying to go with some of the intent there. But for me, that maybe the realism just was almost too real. Like when I want to go and I want to read a story, maybe that's just not for me because I'm looking for maybe something different. But yeah,
Yeah, and
because like if if I can reflect on a book at the end of it and I can feel like, wow, that really opened my eyes, even if it's a little heady or even if I have to think on or chew on some of the content. Sometimes maybe I can actually appreciate a book a lot better after I've had time to actually look back at it. So, just kind of thinking about like maybe some of the attempt of like why you do things, right? And if you think about, I don't know, bad people doing good things or good people trying to do bad things, right? There's a little bit of the moral interest that kind of comes into that, like what's motivating these characters, right?
yeah, and I can see like being a more plot-driven reader with that hook, like that sort of promise at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of like we're going to go on this sort of multi-act structured sort of journey.
On a hero's transformational journey or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This book probably isn't for you. Like as far as it's very very personalizing or personable,
Yeah.
very very much in the heads of these characters. And you had sent me some text messages early in the month where we were reading this. You were reading the part where they were in the tournament, sort of the champions of the union were fighting for or to be the champion of the union, these fencers.
Yep.
And I believe it was 16 individuals, so you had to win four
Mm-hmm.
rounds.
Yep.
And you had sort of these two favorites between Jazal, like Luthar, and then Gorst, I think was his name. And Gorst is sort of this massive,
Mm.
hulking, sort of brute of like a
The
farm.
Goliath.
Yeah, like a farm guy. Who he's this lesser noble from like the outskirts of the outskirts of the Union. He does come back as far as like in future books that are both in this trilogy and later. I will say that much because they do build him up quite a bit too. You have this, but during that chapter in particular, and you had said that one was kind of grabbing you more than some of the others, there
Mm.
is a lot of jumping between perspectives. Like you have Glokta off to the side, and he's paying attention to Baez. So he's giving you this insight into what's this guy doing? Something weird is happening. And you have him paying attention to Luth, and he's like, I am the greatest fencer ever, and he is doing things that are physically not possible. And then you have Logan off to the side watching Baez, and there's like the hint of magic on Baez where he can kind of see the magic, right? And so you get this sense that you understand that there's something going on. And in pretty much all of the other chapters, it's single voice. So you're seeing this sort of long, sort of drawn out chapter of pretty benign substance, right? It's like I'm moving from point A to point B, and these are my thoughts. And then you have this chapter, which is bouncing from Logan to Glokta to Jazal in the fight, over to Glokta again, back to
Yeah.
Logan, and you have it's definitely more for like frenetically paced for sure. So I feel like that can be a big draw to the end of the book, where the beginning may not feel as
Sure.
fast paced. And it almost kind of plays back to the prologue where it titled The End, because that read more like the end of a book. Like there's this cliffhanger thing that happens, right? Versus like the end of the book is sort of more the more catchy part of it. But And the hero's journey doesn't start until the end of the book. Like they all get on a boat at the end to go do the thing, which has been sort of set up throughout the entirety of this first book.
Kids getting on a boat, sailing off.
And then they finally sort of take off. So where other books are starting, this book is kind of ending, which is kind of interesting. And you get a much more in-depth understanding of the players at the start of it, at the start of the journey. You're not just jumping right in and kind of learning about the characters on the way.
You feel like you had any like epiphanies as you were reading through this, like either just throughout the text, driven by the text, or in culmination afterwards, reflecting on it, feeling like you were enlightened in any way, like that it moved you in a particular fashion?
I mean, from the perspective of humanity, or like
What
as to the
anything that
future
just
of the
struck
story?
you that, well, not even, more as a reader, like was there anything that you went, wow, like I guess I didn't really think about it that way, right?
Nothing that I really went, wow, that I've never really thought of it that way, but things that
Yeah.
I looked back on and said, that's an interesting take and an interesting perspective. You've read the Odyssey, yes?
Many moons ago, but yes.
Yeah, so the title, the blade itself, is sort of taken from the Odyssey.
Mm,
I think the quote was, "The blade itself incites in acts of violence," or something along those lines.
okay.
Um, yeah, if you could look it up for me, I think it's
Yeah.
close to that. And you have these characters who are all
Yeah.
warriors.
The blade itself incites the deeds of violence.
Yeah, so essentially saying like a blade. I think he in the Odyssey they want to take away all the swords or something because like just the act of having a sword
Yeah.
incites violence. Like if weapons are present, there will be violence, right? And I think in this book, all of the characters are sort of these warriors. Like they are the blades. And you have Logan who's trying to get away from his deeds of the past up in the north, where he's this warrior who did bad things and him and his gang were kind of leaving in order to avoid and almost escape war. You have Jazal, who's a fencer. You have Glokta kind of looking back on his past, but as they're warriors and they've been shaped by sort of their military experience, they themselves are the blades per se, blades,
Right.
and
Yeah.
they're going
Yep.
to find themselves drawn to violence and violence
Mhm.
drawn to them. Even Major West, like sort of the man of the people
Mhm.
throughout the book. He's sort of a secondary character, but he's the only really good person in the book. And then in the middle of it, he beats his sister. And you're kind of left with, this was my one character who I could kind of root for. And it's just thrown out the window. But looking at that title and seeing all of these characters being drawn back to violence. Glokta as a torturer, Jazal sort of looking for glory and the glory of war and fencing, and Major West and his being drawn to violence and his anger with things, and Logan sort of this realistic barbarian who, and from realistic I mean his perception of the world is
Mm.
realistic. He's very utilitarian. He is also trying to escape, but keeps getting drawn back into the fight.
Mm.
I think as I finished the book, I was kind of reflecting back on that this was almost a commentary on war and soldiers and soldiering, and the fact that like you are shaped into a weapon and you keep kind of getting drawn back into that. And you don't see much purpose outside of that. But other than that, not really. I can't say that there was anything in this that I saw as a really big philosophical,
That's
mind-altering
yeah,
message.
no, but even that, like, I don't think I really reflected on that. I think that I don't think I really looked that deep. So I'm happy to have that context, right, from the Odyssey, because I don't think I was thinking about that. So
And I'm not sure if that was authorial intent either. Like that could
yeah,
just be something I kind of garnered from the book
okay,
versus the it does seem to be more in that authorial intent to be sort of the antithesis of the classic fantasy novel.
yeah,
Like the direct antithesis of it.
yeah,
Because I'm reading The Fellowship
yeah.
to my son right now, and as I'm going through it, I know I'm at page 250. I don't think I know what Frodo looks like.
That's
Like
that's fair, right? Yeah,
just given the context of like loved that book as a kid. I still do.
yeah,
Like reading it,
yeah,
there is some like nostalgia, right,
yeah,
for
yeah,
the Lord of the Rings, and we grew up in the time when the movies all came out, and
yeah,
it's very friendly, like from a middle grade perspective. I read that when
yeah,
I was what, sixth
yeah.
grade,
Middle
fifth,
grade,
sixth
yeah,
grade,
middle
right?
school, right?
And I loved it. Now reading it to my son and being we're out of the Prancing Pony, we're at Weathertop,
Hmm.
we just had the big fight, right? And
Hmm.
I'm like, what do they look like? Why are they going on this mission? Like, there is no
Yeah,
reason for him to take this ring to
yeah.
Mordor other than Gandalf told him.
Right, and even so, I'm actually reading this and to my son right now, and it's funny because he loved The Hobbit, and you probably actually do get a little bit more description like in The Hobbit, and you
Yeah.
kind of carry that into the Lord of the Rings, and he doesn't give much description there. But what's interesting is like as compared to the movies, I even forgot about this because like having read it so long ago, I think that I've watched the movies probably 10, 20,
Hmm.
50 times, right? And so you almost forget kind of what the actual text looks like. And so as I'm reading it, I'm going, man, like this is really a different dialogue that Gandalf sets him on this journey, and he's like conflicted in the beginning, and it's a very different kind of
Please hold.
So let's talk ratings of the book.
yeah.
Give out of 10 to give a little more room than like the out of
Yeah,
5 scale that you see in like Goodreads and Storygraphs and whatnot.
yeah.
Out of 10, what would you give the blade itself?
You go first.
Okay. I would give the blade itself an 8 out of 10.
Really?
Yeah,
8 out of 10?
8 out of
What?
10. From character development, I enjoyed
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Uh, I thought it was entertaining. It was a fast read. I
Okay.
mean, for such a large book.
Yeah.
Um, I liked I liked a lot of the humor.
Yeah.
I did find the characters to be likably abhorrent.
Yeah.
Like they were terrible in all the right ways. So I would give it an 8 out of 10. I would definitely read it. Like I read it the first time and I read it through very quickly, like a very cursory reread,
Yeah.
superficial reread for this.
Right.
Um, like I would read the second and third books again as well, and then carry on into the second trilogy and the couple standalones. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It's interesting. I saw some transformation with Glokta since like his character was kind of interesting, right? I can appreciate that. I think that there were moments that like I was pulled in. So I don't think that was like the writing per se, right? And I actually, like you mentioned, Abercrombie's ability to be able to play with points of view, the pacing of that at times like was effective. I felt like there were pieces that I could, maybe even chew on more. So I don't just because like my initial rating would probably be more like a 2 out of 10. I
Oh
don't
geez.
Yeah, like I was surprised. I really wanted to like it. I felt like it was way more. Maybe I should give it a three because it was way more accessible than other books that we've read as well. And that, to be honest, on other books, it's more the naming conventions of a lot of like the fantasy
Hmm.
kind of genre that it's hard for me to like even stick with a character if you've got like 20 different characters and you're trying to world build and it's too big, right? So like at least this, it was targeted to maybe a more palatable like reading experience. But yeah, just in general, I think if there could have been for me more of a hook in the beginning for me to really get a sense of like why do I even care, it probably would have pulled me along in a different narrative. And like if I don't know, I don't think I picked up on some of the humor just because I was turned off in the beginning. Okay. All right. So uh yeah, so maybe a 3 out of 10.
Okay.
I feel like that's being generous.
All right. We'll just do this and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
So for next month, so the month of December, or no, November, and we can come up with the date as to when we're going to discuss this book. We each picked three different books, and I alternated them on the side here. So the Book of Joy was a choice of yours. Lonesome Dove was a choice of mine, which very popular right now,
Okay.
making a resurgence, even though it was written in the 80s. Origin was a book of yours. Outwitting the Devil was a choice that I added. It's been recommended to me to listen to the audiobook because
Okay.
apparently the audiobook is great. I don't want to talk about it, which I'm in the middle of, which you actually added to the list. And then Same Bed,
Because you
Different
mentioned it.
Dreams.
Yep. Nice.
So let's see what we're reading next month there.
Let's talk about it.
And we're going to talk about it, apparently. Um,
Nice.
So I'm currently on page 137 of this book. So I will have it fresh in my mind when you and I talk about it in a month. Um, and then you'll pick a different book to kind of fill its spot.
Sounds good. Awesome.
All
I'll put on
right.
that J.J. Abrams book, The Ship of Theseus.
Okay. So for
Yep.
December.
Yep.
Alrighty. Well, we'll spin this again a month from now. We'll keep the rest of them the same and we'll replace the one.
All
All
right.
right, Eric.
Sounds
I
good.
will see you next month.